Today we're going to do our first exercise in JavaScript using all the stuff we've learned so far in all the previous episodes. So as you guys can see, this is the example I showed you guys in episode 2 when we started learning JavaScript. And in this example here, I made an interactive menu that we could click on in order to open and close it. So as you guys can see, we can actually do something inside a website using JavaScript. So in this episode, we're going to learn how to build this exact menu here. Now what I have for you guys is a small document, or at least a small zip file that you guys can download inside the description of this video, because you're going to need to have the image that we use in this episode. We have the small X up here, and we also have the logo. So what I'm going to go ahead and do here is I'm going to go ahead and go inside a completely new document that only has the very basics of an HTML5 setup. Now inside this document, we're going to go ahead and set up the stuff that we need to use in order to get started with the JavaScript part. So inside my head tag, I'm going to go ahead and link to a style sheet that we haven't created yet. So I'm going to say link, I'm going to click tab because I can do that inside my text editor. And as you guys can see, we get a link to a style sheet. I'm going to go ahead and click style.css. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new document called style.css. So we actually have this document we just created a link for. So I'm going to say style.css inside my root folder. As you guys can see, I do already have the image and the closing image. So I'm just going to go ahead and save my style sheet in here. And now we can actually go ahead and get started on creating the things that we need inside our front page, because this is index.html, meaning that this is the front page. So inside the body tag, I'm going to go ahead and create a nav tag, meaning that we're going to create a navigation here. I'm just going to go ahead and move it out so we have some hierarchy. And inside this navigation, and inside the opening nav tag, I'm going to go ahead and include an ID, because we're going to have to use it when we want to do something with JavaScript. So I'm going to say ID, I'm going to call this one menu. Even though we could call it something, slightly better, I'm just going to go ahead and call it menu for now. Inside the nav tags, I'm going to go ahead and include an image, because we need to have the logo for inside the website. As you guys can see, I have a logo in here. By the way, this is the clean website that we're programming right now. So if I go back inside my code editor, save this, and link to my logo.png file, you guys can see that we now have an image. Of course, we didn't do any styling yet, so we're going to have to do that in a second. After we have the image inside our navigation, I'm going to go ahead and include an unordered list. Inside the unordered list, I'm going to create a list item and an anchor tag. I'm just going to say hashtag inside the link, because we don't want it to link anywhere yet. This is just an example. And inside the anchor tags, I'm going to go ahead and write home, because we need to have a link in here. I'm just going to go ahead and copy this down a couple more times. 5 times. And the first one, or at least the second one, is going to be changed to cases. The third one is going to be personal projects. The fourth one is going to be about me. And the last one is going to be contact. So now that we have a very basic navigation here, I can actually go ahead and go inside my style sheet and style this. So inside my style sheet, I'm just going to go ahead and include a couple of default things that we need to have whenever we start a new website. So I'm going to create a multiplication symbol, curly brackets, which means that we're styling everything inside this website. I'm going to write margin. I'm going to set equal to 0. I'm going to create padding. Set it to 0. Now, if you don't know what we're doing here, we're just basically resetting all the margins and paddings inside the website, since some browsers have some default paddings and default margins that we want to get rid of. So now that we've done this, we can actually go ahead and start styling our navigation. So I'm going to say nav, curly brackets, and then inside nav, we're going to go ahead and give it a width. We're going to set the width to 240 pixels, because why not? We can just do something. After width, we're going to go ahead and set background color. I'm going to set it to white. And after the color, we're going to go ahead and set a position. Because whenever I scroll inside this website, I want the navigation to stay out in the left side. So I'm going to go ahead and set the position to fixed, like so. And I'm going to set the top to 0. I'm going to set the bottom to 0. And I'm going to go ahead and set left to 0. So now we should have it going all the way from the top to bottom, and then all the way to the left side of the browser. So the next thing we need to have here is a set index. Because we're trying to create a navigation, it's a good idea to keep it on top at all times. So I'm going to go ahead and set the set index to 1000, which just means that we're basically putting it on the top layer of whatever we have inside the website. And I'm going to go ahead and add a transition effect. Now the transition effect is because whenever we go inside the browser, inside my example here, you guys may notice that when I click the closing icon, it doesn't just pop closed. It actually slides to the left and closes up that way, like so. So we need to have a transition on this entire navigation in order for it to transition when we do something with JavaScript. So I'm going to go ahead and say transition, : I'm going to set it to all, ease, in, out, and I'm going to go ahead and set it to 200 milliseconds, like so. Now, just in case we want to have it working for more than just one browser, at least for just a couple of default ones, let's actually go ahead and set WebKit in front of it, like so. So now that we have this, we can actually go ahead and style the logo we have inside the navigation. If I do actually go back and, well, we do actually need to include a background column, the entire website. So let's actually do that first. I'm going to say body. I'm going to set the background color to some kind of dark gray. So 272727. Now if I go back to the website, as you guys can see, we now have a very dark color and we have the navigation bar on the left side. Now we need to style the stuff inside the navigation as well. So if I go back inside my style sheet, right after the navigation, we're going to go ahead and say nav space img for image. And we're going to go ahead and set display block, just so we're sure we can actually center this by a margin. And we're going to go ahead and set the width to 80%. Of course, you guys can change whatever styling you guys want to. I'm just kind of setting up something I think looks nice. So I'm just going to set the width to 80%. I'm going to say margin 0 auto to get it centered. And then afterwards, I'm going to just push it down slightly from the top of the website. So I'm going to set padding top. And I'm going to go ahead and say 30 pixels. So now if I go back inside the website, you guys can see we now have a logo here. So now I want to style the actual navigation. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to go ahead and go back inside my styling. After the image styling here, I'm going to go ahead and say we have a nav that has a unordered list inside of it, curly brackets. And inside the unordered list, I want to move it slightly away from the left side. So I'm going to say padding left. I'm going to say 30 pixels. I also want to move it away from the logo from the top, meaning that I want to set a padding top, like so. And I want to move it away 60 pixels. Now I'm just going to go ahead and copy this and start styling the list items, meaning that we're just going to, copy paste and just include the list item up here. And inside of here, I want to set the list style to none, just so we have no bullet points inside our menu. And I want to set a padding to 4 pixels and 0 pixels, like so, just so we get a little bit of distance between the menu items. So now that we have this, we can go ahead and style the actual letters we see inside the navigation, giving it a font family, a color, a font style. So we're just going to go ahead and paste this down we just created here. I'm just going to include a anchor tag after the list item. And inside the styling, we're just going to go ahead and delete what we have in here. I'm going to go ahead and include a font dash family. Set it to Arial, because why not? And I'm going to go ahead and include a font weight. I'm going to set the font weight to 300. I'm going to set a color to hashtag 272727, which is the same as the background color. I don't really like to use completely black colors because it gets a little bit too aggressive. So using a dark gray color makes it a lot nicer. We're going to use a text transform because we want to make it uppercase, like so. And now if I go back inside my menu here, you guys can see we now have this. Now we do have an underline, which I just noticed now. So we're going to go up to the top where we have all the styling and just say we want no text decoration. So we're going to say text decoration none, like so. So now we have a very basic menu here. And what we need to do now is include the closing icon up in the top left corner that we can actually click in order to close the menu. So inside my index page, right before the nav tag, I'm going to go ahead and create a div like so. And inside the opening tag of this div, I'm going to go ahead and give it an ID. I'm going to set this one to toggle nav or menu. Let's actually do that. That sounds better. And we're going to go ahead and set a on-click event so that when we click this thing, something happens. So we're going to set this on-click attribute and set it to toggle menu parentheses and save it. So basically what we're doing here is when we click this little div here, we're going to go ahead and activate a toggle menu function that we haven't created yet, which will actually close the menu. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is I'm just going to go ahead and style what we have here, the div tag, so it looks nice, by going back inside the style sheet. I'm just going to go to the bottom here, and I'm going to go ahead and write hashtag toggle menu curly brackets, and then the first thing we're going to write is a width. I'm going to set it to 20 pixels. Now, because I want this to be a complete square, I'm just going to set a height as well to 20 pixels. I'm going to set a background color to white. I'm going to set a background image URL like so. And I'm going to set the image to, let's actually go ahead and see what we called this one because I don't remember, close.png. So I'm going to say close.png. Now after this one, we're going to go ahead and set a background size because we need to make sure the X, the image, is actually covering the entire div. So I'm going to say background dash size, and I'm going to go ahead and set it to cover. So we make sure it covers the entire div inside the actual div. I'm going to go ahead and set a background repeat because we don't want this to repeat inside the div. So I'm just going to say no repeat. And then afterwards, we're going to go ahead and set a position because we need to make sure that the position is at the top left corner of our navigation at all times. So I'm going to say position fixed. Then we're going to go ahead and say top. We're going to say 0 pixels. We're going to say left 0 pixels. Now we need to include a set index because we need to make sure it stays on top of the navigation. If I were to give this one a set index as 500, it would actually go behind the navigation. So we need to make sure we have it above 1000 or just 1000 so it's on the same layer. So I'm going to give it 1050 just to give it something. And after we've done this, we need to make sure that when we hover the mouse cursor on top of this div box, we want to have this hand icon appearing, like it's a link. So I'm going to go ahead and say cursor. And I'm going to set the cursor to pointer. Then afterwards, we're going to go ahead and give this one a border because right now, if I were to refresh to show you guys, you can see it squeezed all the way up against the left side of the corner. So I want to push it away just slightly, but I don't want to have any spacing between the side of the browser and the actual X. So, with the hand icon we get when we hover on it. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a border. I'm going to set the border to 10 pixels just to get quite a bit. And I'm going to go ahead and set it to solid and a background color of white. So it's the same color as the actual background of the div. After we've done this, I'm just going to go ahead and give it a border radius because why not? Which means that we are rounding off the corners of div. So I'm going to say border radius and set it to 2 pixels. After we've done this, I want to include a transition because I want to, when I hover, if you take the example here, when I hover on the logo or the icon up here, you guys can see it gets slightly transparent. If I close it, as you guys can see, I want to have this transition effect. So if I go back inside the code, I'm just going to go ahead and copy the transition we have up here inside our nav tag and paste it in at the bottom here. So now that we have this, I'm going to go ahead and create a hover effect. So I'm going to copy what we have here, just delete all the code we have inside of here, and say we have a opacity. I'm going to set it to 0.7, like so, which means that now, well, we do actually need to include the hover, like so, which means that now, if I go back inside, refresh, you guys can see that we get this hover effect, a transition hover effect that changes the opacity. So now that we have all this, we can actually go ahead and start including the JavaScript code we need in order to open and close this navigation. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to go ahead and go inside my index file in here. I'm going to go to the very bottom since I want to load the JavaScript code after all the stuff has been loaded. So I'm going to go to the bottom here right before we close off the body tag. And I'm going to go ahead and include a script tag. Inside the script tag, we're going to go ahead and include a variable, because in order to keep track of when we actually open and close the navigation, we need to set some kind of value. This value can either be true and false, it can be 1 or 0, it can be whatever we want it to be. So I'm just going to go ahead and say we have a variable called toggle status. So we know the status of the navigation, and I'm going to set it equal to 1. Now in my head, 1 means that we have it open, and 0 means that we close it, okay? So after we have this variable created, which we don't actually use yet, I'm going to go ahead and create the function we created in the top here called toggle menu. So we do actually activate toggle menu when we click this X icon. So I'm going to say we have a function called toggle menu, parentheses, curly brackets, and then inside the curly brackets, we're going to go ahead and create an if statement, which we talked about in one of the previous episodes we just did. So inside the parentheses of this if statement, I'm going to go ahead and say, well, if toggle status is equal to 1, then it needs to run whatever block of code is inside these curly brackets here. So I'm going to say toggle status is equal to 1. Then it needs to go inside the document dot and get some kind of element that has a specific ID, which in this case is the menu that has an ID as menu, and do something to it. So we want to get element by ID, parentheses, and get one called menu. Then afterwards, we want to say, okay, after we get this menu, we want to change the styling that we have inside the CSS file. So I'm going to go ahead and say style, and do bear in mind the way I'm doing it right now only allows for us to change one styling at one time, meaning that we need an entire new line of code if I were to change something else. We do have another way we can do this with the styling if we want to style multiple things inside just one line of code. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and do it with, like we do it here. So I'm going to say style, which means that we're now saying we want to style this object, dot, and then the attribute inside the CSS we want to change, which in this case is left, because right now inside my menu, if I can find it at the very top here, the nav tag over here that has a ID as menu right now has a left set to 0, which means that it's touching the left side of the browser. If I were to set this as a negative, it's going to go ahead and move beyond the browser, meaning that we want to change this to a negative number, which is going to be the same width we included for the entire nav. So inside the index file, I'm going to change the left, set it equal to double quotes, minus 240 pixels, and close off the code. So now when I do actually click the menu, at least click the icon up there, it's going to go ahead and set menu, which is the entire navigation, to left minus 240 pixels. Now after doing this, we're also going to have to change the toggle status that we included up here to something else. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this, go down to the next line inside the if statement, and change the toggle status to 0. So right now, toggle status has changed. So if I were to click this button again, right now, because this if statement checks if the toggle status is equal to 1, which right now it has been changed, it is no longer going to run this if statement, because toggle status right now is going to be 0 after the first time we click it. So what we can do here is we can go ahead and include an else if statement, parentheses, curly brackets, and inside this else if statement, we're going to check if toggle status is equal to 0. Inside the curly brackets, I'm just going to go ahead and copy the 2 lines of code we have up here, move it inside, and of course the toggle status after we're done running the else if statement needs to be changed back to 1, meaning that the next time it's going to go ahead and go back to the if statement up here. Now in here, we want to change the menu back to 0. So not a minus and 240, we want to change it to 0. So what you guys will notice now is that when we do actually go back inside the website, refresh, I click the X icon, it moves away. When I click it again, you guys can see we now get the navigation back inside the browser. So this is how we can do, very basic JavaScript coding using, for example, a navigation. And again, like I showed you guys, we've been using quite a few of the things we've learned so far, using variables, we've been using conditional statements, we've been using comparison operators inside the parentheses inside the else if and else statements and if statement. So we've been doing quite a few things in here. So I hope you guys enjoyed. In the next episode, I think we're going to be doing another exercise. So I hope you guys will enjoy that. I'll see you guys next time.